Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. It was pointed out in the first session that not everybody is in Nigeria. Sorry, we were being Nigerian centric before. So wherever you're joining from, it will actually be nice to know where you're joining from. So if you can, type it in the chat box. Let's know where in Nigeria you're joining us from and where in Africa or across the world you're joining us from.
Yeah, that'll be good.
The second session for today. Adedamola, thanks for joining. Ashetu, Blessing, Olanle, Comforts. Some usual suspects are here. Elizabeth, thanks for joining again. You are all welcome. It's been a great start to the day. Okay, Juliet from Ogun State, Nigeria. Thanks for joining. We had a fantastic session at 9 a.m. I think some of us are yet to recover from that, but I have to go back to back. Okay. Let's know where you're joining from. Emmy from Lagos, thanks for joining. It's great to have you all here. Trust your Sunday is going very well. Samuel from Lagos, thanks for joining. Samuel Dari, Olorun Dari, thanks for joining. Adedamola from Lagos, thank you very much. I think the rest of Africa, they're not yet here. Eunice from Lagos, thank you for joining. Uche from Lagos. Shegun from Songo, Ogun State. Thank you for joining. It's great to have you here. Okay, while we're doing that, let's quickly give Bolande from Lagos, Nike from Lagos. Thanks for joining. Let's quickly give a warm welcome to, you know how we do. So I'll read his bio, then you know what to do. The virtual applause and standing ovation in the comment section. So get ready to welcome Kamal and give him a thrive welcome to this session. Felicia from Lagos, you're welcome. Okay. Great, let's meet Kamal. So Kamal recently joined BNP Paribas as an Associate Vice President, Human Resources. In his role, he leads the provision of strategic HR business partnering to several divisions within the Montreal office of the bank. Prior to BNPP, Kamal gained extensive experience and expertise in leadership development, talent management, succession planning, organizational effectiveness, and mentoring high potential managers with British American Tobacco. At BAT headquarters in England, he was the first Black African to hold the role of regional head of talent management for Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That's the EMEA region, supporting 13,000 employees. Prior to joining BAT, Kamal began his career working in the consulting firm of KPMG Professional Services before moving on to Accenture. Fantastic. Kamal holds a bachelor's degree from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and a master's of arts with distinction from Fielding Graduate University, Santa Barbara, California. He is a certified executive coach with the International Coach Federation, ICF, and a certified change manager with Prosky. He has lectured several cohorts of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management in Nigeria and was a volunteer faculty with Faith Foundation, a not-for-profit supporting entrepreneurs in Nigeria. He currently lives in Montreal, Canada, with his wife and 2 kids. He'll be speaking on leveraging succession planning to emerge stronger. Let's give a warm, big tHRive welcome to Kamar Aderbigbe. Let me see the emojis in the chat sessions. Thank you very much. If I don't get enough claps, I won't start the sessions. So please, let's give him a warm welcome. Yes. So thank you, Stella. Thank you. Thank you, Che. Okay. I think we have enough applause now.
Yeah, no,
so
thank
you. Amal. I know it's about 7 a.m. your time there, so I hope we didn't bring you out of bed too early today.
No,
Thanks for making time your busy schedule to join us.
My pleasure. Certainly my pleasure.
We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, thank you. My pleasure, Judith, and thank you so much. Thank you for the invite, and great, always a pleasure to share knowledge and to share a little bit about my own background and experience with people. And so, really pleasure to be here. Okay. So, do I have the floor?
Yes, over to you, sir.
Okay, cool. So, and thank you, Julie. Thank you for that excellent introduction, and great to have you all here. Great to see everyone from every part of the world, and thank you for your warm welcome. I've seen all the messages in the chat, and please, again, typically it could be the Q&As come at the end, but if something comes up in your mind that you want us to sort of drop with me, you can then share, and then please, as much as is going on, I don't want to just be talking and it feels very isolated, and then I need some sort of feedback on some questions that I'm going to be asking you. And so, yeah, let me share my screen so that that comes through. Okay. So Judy, what I'll rely on you for is to give me some feedback through the chat box, because once I go full screen, I might not be able to see them as easily.
Okay, that's
cool. So I'll rely on you to help me with responses from the chat room. So yeah, this when Judy and it's so interesting how moments happen, right? So when Judy reached out to me on LinkedIn and said he wanted me to do this session, we had barely known each other, but then fast forward a few days, literally later, we discovered a mutual connection that even strengthened the bond. And interestingly, we'd agreed to work together before we recognized that bond. So it was really just a moment that was meant to be. I use this, I'll share a bit about myself. My style with this session, you see I have several slides to talk through content, but also important that I said, I'd like to, give a few minutes. I'll ask you guys, do you see this? Do you have this? Have you experienced that? It'd be good to just share some quick bites from you. This image, when I was looking for what best described what succession planning looked like, was what sort of represented what it represented to me. And I've been a beneficiary of excellent succession planning. Actually, I was hired to replace my boss. And she did that. She hired me to replace her when I joined British American Tobacco almost 13 years ago. And I know it was unheard of as a thing, even in Nigeria at the time, that how can she hire you to replace her? Because typically, you don't want to let go of a position. This is what was known as a practice for a lot of companies. And that's why when you even sit back and think about it, you ask yourself, how many organizations that you think of are wholly locally grown, Nigerian made, born and bred and built in Nigeria, have survived beyond the founder, right? Typically, you find that in 8 out of 10 cases, or even, probably have to check my statistics, but I'm sure I'm probably correct that once the founder is dead or gone or somehow, that transition never happens. You can think of any name of organizations. The modern day ones that we're looking forward to seeing, so what happens, are the companies run by guys like Femi Otedola, and companies run by Dangote, and even companies run by guys like Mike Adenuga, you can be sure if they don't have a succession plan in place, and it's very likely, and if the succession planning is not based on proper metrics like performance management, skills assessment, properly setting up the guidelines to ensure there's transitioning to replace the current CEO, it's not going to happen. And we all know our country, we all know the cultures that exist and how we struggle with them. There's one company actually that has been doing a relatively, I'd say, good example of transitioning, but because they're in the financial services sector and they were forced to do that, right? UBA. So I've seen UBA change a number of CEOs, and each time they become stronger. But everybody pretty much understands that, you know what, it's Tony Elumelu's baby, and if without the driving energy of Tony, what's going to happen to UBA? But I think it'll probably survive. Why? Because UBA was an entity that existed. His vision took it to where it is today because it was sort of going dead. But again, we're talking about UBA. UBA was not a company that was founded by either Tony or any of the people on the board. We're talking about wholly owned, created, started up in Nigeria. How many of them do you know that are in existence? I'd be happy to hear from you if you know of a company that has survived beyond the founder. The name of it really, and it's not a company you will go and everybody goes, what? Which company is that? A company that you believe we will all recognize. The minute you say the name in the chat room, all of us will know that company. Please feel free to type a company that has survived beyond the founder. And I make this point to really buttress the message about why we need to plan for succession. It's so crucial. It's what guarantees your business beyond you and beyond. If your product, or if you created a company to really do what you said, which is provide content and services to a generation beyond you, then you should be comfortable with succession planning. But it's still the one thing that I find, even in the Western world, there's still parts of it that the concept of succession planning is not properly done, or is still considered alien to them. But I just find that with a lot more, it's probably far behind, much more behind in Africa due to the nature of the culture as well. And so this red door, think of the red door as the door of the CEO, and every other door are the doors you need to go through before you're considered ready to be a CEO. Okay, and you can see the doors are coming from the left and from the right. And so what that means that is you can't have multiple paths to becoming the CEO. You're not going to go through just one side or one. No, some people are coming from the left. And the classic example is, for what does that mean, or what does that look like, is think of CEOs who came from the finance journey or CEOs who came from the marketing side of the business. And not surprisingly, you can see that there'll probably be more opportunities to become a CEO if you've come through the marketing side and less than the finance side. But equally, they are both, individuals who could challenge to become the CEO of a company. And, in the blurb that Julie asked me to write, I gave two really great examples of individuals who joined the company and grew and became the CEO several years later. When they hired them, they probably didn't see CEO, but they developed them once they started to see the potential in them. So those are some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today. And as I'm talking and you have some questions, please, like I said, drop it in the chat room. And if I have to, I'll definitely stop and take a few questions from time to time. Okay. So, when Jide explained about my background, I already dropped it that my job at BAT, I was hired to replace my boss. And what I went through has been and still remains one of the most phenomenal career development experience in my life. It's like, I don't know that I'll ever have that kind of experience again, because from the very first day I walked into the building, the things, the actions, the steps that I enjoyed were geared toward preparing me to replace my manager. And interestingly, of course, when you're giving these things, there's an expectation that you should respond. So the more I was given, the more I even responded with more, because I was trusted before I even delivered. And that's so crucial. And so once I was given that information, I'm preparing you to take over from me, all my head, everything I did, all my thought process, all my actions were geared towards, picturing myself taking over from my boss. And that's why succession planning drives employee engagement. And that's why transparency and trust in succession planning conversation, it drives it. Yeah, will there be difficult conversations? For sure, right? There'll be so many difficult conversations about succession planning that you may not be able to share and all that. But the more transparent you are, the better you're able to drive the outcomes that you expect. Okay. And everybody with me so far? Okay. So some of the things I put in there that we wanted to cover today that I will really talk about in a brief detail. And trust me, when Julie and I were even having our brainstorming session, I almost started unloading all of it. And you could see even on the first slide, but I'll go through some sort of structure. And with that, we will have, a really good sort of walk through on the different topics. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah. So we want to talk about how succession planning helps achieve business strategy. What can you do to design and build a succession plan? How to achieve buy-in and succession decisions, and maybe understanding readiness. So, but before I even go into that piece of, before I even go there, how many people on the, in the room today, listening to this, if you have succession plans in place in your organization, can you just give a thumbs up in the chat room? And if you don't have, you can just put thumbs down as well. If there's something that looks like that you understand that maybe you're not involved, you've heard about it, is there anything in your organization today that says, oh, there's something that looks like a succession plan? Oh yeah, so if you just started, then you've got one. That works.
Okay, so Grace, thumbs down.
Okay.
Elizabeth says we don't have. Omotola says we just started. Okay. Blessings sort of.
What is sort of? So sorry.
Ashetu says not yet. Juliet says yes. Then it thumbs down from bottom.
Okay. So yes. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to know the startup. So and if I can hazard the guess as to sort of, if it exists, it's probably only for a few roles and for a few people, and only if people are even aware of it. Okay. So yeah, again, this is the thing. This, if you say sort of, it means that they're thinking, and you can see from some of the responses you've been reading, Jide, it feels like not a lot of people either have the succession plan in place in the organization. Yeah. Any other comments from anyone?
So Rosemary says we only talk about it, but haven't started. Asia gives a thumbs up. Emmy says in place, but needs to be reviewed.
Rosemary, that's like me and going to the gym. I always talk about it, but I just never start. I keep saying I'll do it, but he hasn't started yet. So and I think, and so that brings me to really my first point as to, okay, so what is succession planning? What are we talking about here? What do we want to see when I say succession planning, when I keep going on and on about what succession planning? So first thing is, once you have a business as an organization, I'm going to put up definition. You can read that. That's not what I'm going to talk about. I'll speak to more than just the definition. You want to understand that as a business that is existing to grow and deliver results and drive customer satisfaction, the more you continue to grow your business and drive satisfaction, then you start to think about how will this business live beyond this current generation of individuals that are working with me. It doesn't matter who they are. It may be your family members, it may be employees you hired. You have to start think about it. Think about how will this exist? And so that's why it says employees available to meet the strategic objectives of the organization. That's what it is. You're training them, you're developing them to achieve the goals that have been set for the company. And if you set goals that are 5, 10, 15 years, what I say and what I learned when I was, as a talent manager, when I was working at BAT is when we plan for succession, we plan for the time when we will no longer be here. Because that's what it is. It's about sustainability. It's about the future that you haven't even realized, the future that you're not even there yet. And it also talks about, a tool to identify employees who have the potential to assume key positions in the organization and prepare them for the future. Because that's what succession plan does. Think about a typical organization, and we'll see how this breaks down when we talk more about succession planning. First, you have the divisions that you work for, and there's all the different departments, HR, finance, sales, marketing, factory production. And those different divisions, you want to be planning for successors at the top of them, and then decide how low or how deep do you go within the organization. Okay, the depth you want to go to plan for succession. Do you want to stay at the managers only, or do you want to stay only at the top? And even if you don't, what then does that look like if you say, I want to plan for the whole organization? Do you have the capacity to do that? And even if your organization is small, the fact that you're thinking about it, there are some names or some conversations you should be having to ensure that you're aligning this. And let's be clear. Now, talk about this now. Maybe we'll also go into it in a little bit. Succession planning is not replacement planning. Replacement planning is when you're planning to replace an individual. Think of the timelines, and what differentiates the two of them critically is your timeline. The succession plan timelines are usually longer. They go out for 10, 15 years. It's even 20 years beyond that. So you plan for succession over a longer period. You plan replacement over a short period. Yeah, you plan replacement planning when you know somebody's going on mat leave. That's replacement planning. For somebody going off in mat leave in 2 months' time, in 3 months' time, and maybe the person hasn't declared to you that she's going off on maternity leave, but you just discovered that this person is pregnant, therefore I need to find a replacement. Then you start to think about, who do I need to replace the person with? Replacement planning, you do it when an employee needs to go off on short-term disability or short-term illness absence, that then goes from short into long-term absence. Okay, because the person is sick and you still need to continue supporting the individual. That's replacement planning. So it's important to distinguish replacement planning from succession planning. By the time you have to do replacement planning, it's already too late to succession plan. It's already too late. And so that's why you think of succession planning as a strategic, longer term focus, right? That you drive over a number of years. And that's why the structures you need to build to prepare for succession planning is so critical. And understanding the what it is will help you. And then obviously closely linked to that is, is at the end of the day, what you really want when you're doing a succession plan is to have the right people in the right positions at the right time. So here are some points that I put up. Why do we even need to plan succession? Like I said already, the first thing is to help you drive sustainable business. You need to be in a position where the going concern, accountants measure the viability of a business using the concept called the going concern. When finance people assess the organization and they see that the numbers they're producing, either cash flow, profit, the revenue they're making, they're asking the question, will this company still be here next year? When you ask us, come and audit your books, that's the same thing succession planning does from the people side. Will this be a going concern? And you know what's interesting? For some of the more structured organizations where the corporate governance is very, very strong, a weak succession plan or an inability or a lack of succession plan is now flagged as a risk item by the risk committee. It is also flagged as a gap by the audit committee, the internal audit committee, where they review an organization's books and they review their HR plan, and they see there's an absence of a succession plan for roles they consider to be critical. They're going to flag that. They will flag that as a risk, and the audit guys will not come knocking and go, look, there's an issue here. Or if the process of achieving, the succession plan there's a gap in it, auditors will come and ask you questions. So think about that. If you think this was just an HR exercise, that was something being done by HR people to decide why should I even plan succession, because who knows where this business will be in 10 years from now, I may not even be here, then maybe you shouldn't have joined the company in the first place. Because you have to be part and parcel of the conversation to drive succession, to plan for the next generation of individuals. And yeah, I told you, right? So it helps drive, first of all, it helps to drive a sustainable business because that's what you want. The second thing, very sure, it helps you mitigate against the risk of sudden departures. There are two examples of sudden departures that can happen. The first one is the sudden departure due to death. But that's not the only opportunity for sudden departure. So what if the person doesn't die? We have a common joke that we used to say when as part of my team, when we were talking about succession planning. And because we always used to ask this question to get right to the heart of the matter when a manager is struggling to decide on making a choice. We say, so what if XYZ gets hit by a boss tomorrow, who will you put in the role? Do you understand? And the only reason we're able to ask who will you put in the role is because we've been preparing some people to even be in the consideration. The worst thing you want to do is suddenly someone leaves, you go, oh my goodness, what do we do? And then the CEO calls you, or the HR manager calls you, get me 10 CVs of a legal manager tomorrow. And you're like, where do I even start from? If you've been there, please let me know. Yeah? Let us know. Just send you a message and say, okay, urgently, we need to hire, this new guy, because the CFO called the CEO overnight and said, I'm leaving. So when you've been planning succession, when you have some people in place, yeah, you end up deciding that people, do not be scared to lose people. Yeah, you should be worried about losing your best people, but you will not be scared to lose certain people. And actually, you plan for certain people to leave, because and we'll talk about a term when I get to the next slide. You see that term that I want to talk about. You plan for certain people to leave. You plan for them to leave. If you've been preparing them to send to a role to succeed a particular person, and they can't make that succession jump, you need to plan for them to be out of the organization. And there's nothing unkind about it. It's the same thing about spending money. I think my job as an HR manager has exposed me to a lot about what the finance people do, and I'm always borrowing lessons from them. So I use a lot of their analogies, because I find that even though they talk about numbers and just money, they appear to be more dedicated and ruthless to making choices than decisions made by HR managers. We tend to sometimes go into the maybe sentiment, emotion. No. You've been preparing that this individual will not achieve succession. Yes, you need to make a decision, and it's okay if you have to ask them to leave. It's okay. Now, in the context of the culture of your organization, there's nothing you do that you don't decide according to the culture of your organization. You have to do this in context of the culture of your organization. So don't assume that I'm talking out of my own ideal world. It wasn't easy to always implement succession decisions, but what worked was the commitment from everybody that this was going to happen. We made it happen because everybody talked about it, that this is what we were going to do. So risk of sudden departures, I already gave you an example of that. One was if people leave due to death, or they leave suddenly due to turnover, or they leave suddenly due to you choosing. It's no longer sudden if you plan for them to leave because they were underperforming. It's no longer sudden. So succession, you plan. Why again do you do this? You have to do this to identify gaps in your pipeline. You need to. So when you think about the 4 divisions I talked about, finance, marketing, sales, HR, you need to know which of my divisions, which of my departments do I have the right amount of people waiting in line. And like, just to address that one already, as I'm thinking about it now, when you have people waiting in line and you're concerned that, the person behind is going to feel upset or disgruntled if I don't promote them in time, those are the conversations we need to have. What does in time mean? What does that mean for the person and for your organization? That means your organization is not growing. Because if your business is growing, you always have opportunities to develop individuals you consider to be high potential. So when you identify gaps in your pipeline, so what does that look like? You want to identify a gap in your pipeline. You need to know how many employees are in preparation to take over the number one role within that department. And sometimes it's across geographies, how many individuals are available. We used to map our succession gaps. We used to track them according to functions. And I also track them according to the geographies that I supported. Because when I moved to England and I was responsible for the entire, I was responsible for half of the world at that time. And that one is a story that may come out during this session, or at another time we can talk about that. But even as I was responsible for half of the world, everything from, think of the world from Russia all the way to Senegal, they were all the divisions that were in my patch. The only markets I didn't cover were some of the Western European markets. So my job was to track gaps in the succession pipeline according to the geography and also according to the functions. So what that meant was I had two layers that I was tracking succession pipeline gaps. I wanted to know in Russia, in South Africa, in Turkey, in Kenya, in Dubai that I was also supporting, and even I was still managing the team in West Africa at the time. Where did I have an abundance of talent and where did I have a gap? It would not surprise you that whenever I did that map, the whole region, my gaps always came from the sub-Saharan African markets, and then the abundance came from the Eastern European markets. Why? They just had better leaders and better people who were more dedicated to identifying it. And unfortunately for the guys in sub-Saharan Africa, we had been living with way too many expatriates and white people that in terms of the responsibility to be conscious to achieve succession goals, they didn't do it. They just did what they thought they needed to do and they left the organization. So you need to identify gaps in your pipeline according to it. And what that tells you, I like to call the outcome of a succession discussion, a talent planning one, in the financial terms. It's your balance sheet. Where is the health of your pipeline? That's what you're trying to do, the gaps in your pipeline. You need to know, where do you have assets? Where do you have liabilities? Liabilities are either individuals you need to get rid of, as cold as that sounds, yes, individuals you need to get rid of, or areas where there's a hole, you don't have anybody, you cannot develop somebody in time, and you cannot, go out and get somebody in time as well. And of course, through this process, you then increase the pool. Number 4 is the pool of promotable employees that you have. And it's such a crucial part of this exercise. When you review, you know where your gaps are, you identify the best people because you're spending time assessing the quality of employees you've hired. And you need to do this, like I said, this sort of philosophy has to run across the entire value chain of HR. You need to know, once you increase the pool of promotable employees, it starts with everything you do in HR. You hire for potential. You hire for progression. Then you don't hire to just fill in the box. We have made we've said no to candidates at the interview stages because we realized that they were not going to help to fulfill the gap in our pipeline. We said no. Because when we were hiring them, they just seemed like individuals, through the interviews and the nature of the responses they were giving, they seemed like individuals who just come in and fill in that gap. But we don't want to hire to fill a gap. We want to hire to promote and progress. That's what we're looking for. And it's the same thing when you finally come into the organization. We expect you to be progressing and moving into next levels and next stages every single year or every 2 years or every 3 years. And if you're not, we'll have a conversation about it and say, well, maybe this is not the right organization for you. And you also need to have that conversation with yourself that, yeah, maybe I joined the wrong organization and I'll move on. Did we always get it right? No. But trust me, before I left Lagos, I was leading the team to deliver on, before I joined the team, they were doing maybe less than 60% internal promotions. By the time I was leaving, they were doing over 90% internal promotions because we suddenly had more successors. And it wasn't anything I did. It was just me implementing the principles that I'm going to be talking about today with you all and making sure that managers understood them and everybody executed according to them. Okay, we had an increased number of promotable. And of course, when you do an analysis of a succession plan, you then plan development for the successors. And this is why I said succession planning, I repeat it again, is not replacement planning. By the time you need to replace a gap, it's too late to plan the succession. Again, repeating that. It's way too late. You don't do that. The plan development for the successor, you think about, minimum 2 years out, 3, 5 years longer. And even when you're hiring a new joiner, you as a graduate trainee from the university, suddenly, I know a lot of them tend to think sometimes, some of the new joiners that we're hiring today, and you guys may have experienced this too, where somebody joins the company and the following day is asking, so how can I be CEO? What does it take to take on the job of CEO? You have to explain to them that, like, bros, cool down first. There are levels to this thing. You need to go through this. Help them understand that fine. They may be hypertension and impatient, but it's good to have a problem like that where you have people who are demonstrating hypertension than the ones where you don't have anybody, right? And so planning the development for a successor starts several years before that individual even considers themselves a successor. You may or may not have seen it. I was told day one, and it was good because I was already working before I joined the organization. So I already had a job. I'd work in consulting, like Jide was telling you guys. And so I was coming from consulting. I didn't join as a fresh graduate. And so when I was hired, I was told, look, you're going to take over from me. And as simple as that sounds, trust me, it wasn't just about what I was told. It was what was demonstrated to me. And the balance from the employee, which is what you expect, it's a contribution and the value that they're giving to the job every day, the performance they're delivering, how outstanding they are, and we'll see that as well. Okay. I know I've just stayed on one slide and I must have talked for 5 minutes. Any comments or questions? Oh yeah, any comments or questions so far, Jide?
Yes, there's a question from Obaseki Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
It's asking, workforce planning, succession planning, what is the sharp contrast?
Excellent question. So workforce planning takes a much more holistic view of the total, and workforce planning takes a much more total view of the organization, of the people plans you need. And it's definitely linked to succession planning, because what succession planning will do, it will be a contribution into your workforce planning. Okay, because your workforce plan doesn't only take into consideration what you do in succession plan. Succession plan is an element of your workforce plan, because your workforce plan should include how many people you intend to hire, how many people you intend to promote, and what does that look like for your organization from financial point of view, and then what are the compensation decisions that you need to make as part of it. So a total workforce plan that you need to have. And the thing about workforce planning is, once you kind of call it a workforce plan, it gets very scientific to the point where the finance guys want to get involved and they want to know, because for them it's about overheads. We're planning for next year. Again, not a long term. It's strategic, but not in the same way as you do succession planning, because with succession planning, you're very focused on individual roles. A workforce plan is for the whole organization. Then you break it down, you then have succession plans for each of the roles within it. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Any other question?
You also wants to know whether that can we say replacement planning is part of the process of succession planning?
Yeah, for sure. It's at the end of it's the short-term action you then need to execute, right? To achieve succession, you need to replace the incumbent. Yeah, it's part of it, but it's at the very end of it. But remember what we said: if you don't succession plan, by the time you need to replace, it's too late to succession plan. By the time you're replacing individuals, by the time you're executing a replacement action, that means you've been developing that person all this while. That person is getting ready to get into that job. Okay. Please keep your questions coming, and I'll stop from time to time to take them with Jide's help. So I want to talk about some terms, and these terms are some of the terms that are typically used in this succession planning exercise. And the concept here is, so the first one is ready now. And the first one says ready now. What does ready now mean? As defined by your organization, a ready now candidate typically is somebody who is ready to take on the role of the incumbent role within the next 12 months. So some actions you take on ready now candidates will be to say, if you want to promote somebody to the sort of a regional manager, or maybe the first time the person is going to be a manager, from individually managing themselves to managing a team of 10 or 12 people, you need to consider readiness. The first time you promote the person into the job, you say, if this individual is going to become a team leader or a supervisor in 10 months from now, and that's guaranteed because you've been deciding about it, you've been seeing his potential and performance, an action will be to send the person for the new supervisors training program, for instance, or you know that everybody that was promoted in the last 1 or 2 years, 1 year in fact, should go for that kind of program. So you send them on a program like that before or shortly after they take on the role. And so ready now denotes an individual or a candidate who is considered ready to replace the incumbent, ready to take on the role. The other one is bench strength. The bench strength is a measure of how strong the number of individuals, high potential individuals within your succession pool is. Okay, let me repeat that. Your bench strength is a measure of how strong or not the strength of your succession pool. What does strength mean? Strength talks about how many individuals are considered, the measure of how many individuals you consider to be high potential or not within your succession pool. So if you look at your bench strength, and that's part of identifying gaps, right? It's part of gaps. But when you look at your bench strength, you say, how many people within my bench strength are considered high potential? If you have 10 employees, and then there's only 2, so your strength is like 20 for the number of roles, and you maybe need to fill 4 or 5 roles, then your bench strength is weak in that point. Because what it means is, and then this is where the argument comes, yeah, let's just promote them. The minute you do that, you've compromised on quality. So then you don't have a strong bench. You need to build a strong bench. And how do you strengthen your bench? You do everything you always do in HR. That's why succession planning is so integral to other parts of HR. If your bench is weak, your bench strength is not strong enough, you go developing them, right? Establishing long-term development plans, or you go recruiting them because you know you need to have a short fix. But remember, recruitment only works some of the time because the person you're bringing in to replace somebody in the short term to add to your bench strength, that person will not have the same culture as somebody you're developing through your organization. That's why you find companies like Procter & Gamble, they last as long as they have because they have such a high conversion ratio of internal succession moves. Okay. What's a feeder role? Typically, jobs that you say may be roles that are preparing the individual to take on the number 1 role. Okay, so a feeder role for a number of organizations can be the COO, the Chief Operating Officer role. Most people, in a number of cases, the individual that gets appointed to be the COO will be the next CEO, as an example. Or the CFO role could be the feeder role. And sometimes they tell the individual, you need to go into this feeder role. Okay, another thing to talk about around readiness. Readiness should not be determined by the number of years. It's in the number of roles or the skills required to be successful in that job. You don't become the head of marketing or the head of the division head of marketing if you've never done certain jobs within the team. So think about even our profession, HR, as most of you are HR professionals. You want to become the head of HR and you have zero understanding of learning and development, or you say, or even employee relations. And in your journey to becoming the head of HR, you expect to learn all of that while you're on the job. But you actually will become a better HRD if you've had to take on 2 to 3 of the specialist areas within HR. Don't say, I will only always be a generalist, then I will become HRD and then it doesn't matter. You should switch between the 2 sides. Be a generalist sometimes, be a specialist sometimes. It makes your career path richer and therefore your readiness stronger compared to when 2 or 3 HR candidates are considered. What I've done in the past, what I've experienced, what I've been through, the ones we tend to choose to take on the number 1 job are the ones who have done more than one type of role within the HR division, and in some cases, more than one type of geography. Part of what I was sent to England to do when I left Lagos was to prepare me to come back to become the HR director in Lagos. But of course, I had other plans. Canada was calling, so I decided to move on. But anyway, different conversation. But my point is, it was part of my development journey to become the number one role. And then, of course, I became a sudden departure. But guess what? The company was able to respond to not just my leaving, but losing four individuals, four of my peers or my colleagues who were considered successors. And they've all moved on to other HRG roles now, if you know some of them. And because we had succession planned, we already had someone waiting. So your feeder role is essentially a job that is the last job before you take on the actual role. And there could be a number of feeder roles, depending on the organization. Yes, the ubiquitous question, what is talent? This one, I have had all kinds of responses. All kinds of responses. What is talent? What is that? Talent is the talent in the Bible. No, it's talent. Is all employees talent? Are some people talent and some people are not talent? And what if I'm talent? And okay, if I'm not talent, then what am I? Guys, people, let's calm down. Like the young boy said, let's all just calm down. Every employee, if you have a strong talent, if you have a strong people management strategy and you decide how you uh, assess employees clearly, every employee you've got should be part of your talent pool. Now, will you have definitions within your talent pool to explain what type of talent category they belong to? Yes. Yeah, you should. But don't even get into this debate about who is talent and who is not talent. Forget it. All employees should be considered talent, because today somebody who is not demonstrating potential may be demonstrating potential tomorrow. So what is important is not the general term of who is talent or who is not, but if you've decided that all employees are considered talent, what distinctions, what sub classifications do you have around your employees? Because what are the kinds of classifications you can have? You can have high potential talent, right? You can have specialist talent, you can have developing talent, you can have new joiners, you can have graduate trainees as talent, and then you can have individuals where you consider that, well, they might be leaving the company soon, so they're exiting talent. Every employee you have should be in this umbrella. That's why I put it smack in the middle. That debate is such a waste of time. It completely negates the focus of what you want to be doing. Because when you start a conversation as to what's the definition of talent, then you're almost having to justify your job as an HR manager. Okay. And then the 9-box. Okay, so 9-box is an assessment methodology that we'll look at, and I have an example here of a 9-box grid. It's a form of it's really very popular as a tool to assess the performance and potential. And what it does is to lay out on two sides of the X and Y axis the performance versus potential conversation, and then you see the one that has high will be on the. I'm rushing this one because I know I have a full slide about this that we'll talk about it later on. So, but the 9-box, and when I mentioned the word 9-box, you remember what this was talked about here. Okay, so that was an empty one. Mobility, critical, and remember again this one. The word mobility has all kinds of funny meaning, because mobility refers to the willingness of the employee or the talent that you've got to move within the organization. And there's 2 or 3 types of status that the person can have. Actually 3. Is either they're fully mobile, partially mobile, or not mobile. And this becomes a problem if you've decided when an employee says is not mobile or she's not mobile, if the mobility is not conditional and it's final. Like some of us will say, lie, I can never leave Lagos. And they will tell you that the next job opportunity is in Ogun State. You say, I can never go and work in Ogun State. Well, then you're not mobile. But guess what? The opportunity to grow within the organization actually means you need to go to Ogun State, because that's where the next bigger job is. Or even go to the East. We had to have some challenges because we had to have some reviews done because of the challenges we had across the country due to geopolitical issues. But still, we ensured that people we wanted to develop across the country, you were still giving them opportunity. So mobility is defined as the willingness of the employee or that you hired to move around roles. And there's cross-functional mobility, there's internal mobility, there's external mobility, and there's even mobility opportunities that we're considering now, where co-located companies are sending their employees to go and spend time there. So there's some future thoughts around mobility that is unbelievable. There's some guys sending, if you're a retail company, so say think of Amazon or like your Jumias and Congas and things like that. If you have a fully manufacturing organization that you don't have any direct to consumer business, part of your mobility plans will be to send one or two of your employees to go and spend time with your e-commerce partner so they understand the e-commerce value chain properly. And if the individual e-commerce partner is in another part of the world, mobility means that you should say you declare you're mobile or not. If a talent is not mobile, it should affect their potential. There's only so much you can continue to say an employee is high potential and ready to move up when your criteria for succession includes mobility. We grew up and the company has grown up as an international organization. All the leaders at the top, except for maybe less than 5%, have had international careers or have represented the company or the group internationally. So one of the criteria for achieving succession is you have to have had an international career in some shape or form. And if you say you're not mobile, then even though we think of you as high potential, we may have to remove that designation because we recognize that that's not in line with keeping up with our plans for you. Yeah, high potential. We'll talk about that again as part of the outcome of the nine box. These are individuals that, according to the criteria you set, have identified that this person, and this is a very gray one. I know I've gotten challenged about this one also, and I know I still struggle to articulate it sometimes, but I'm clear around why somebody is a high potential and why somebody is not. You base potential on performance. In the corporate world, that's all we've got. What you've demonstrated today is the basis of assuming, and it's an assumption that this same individual will do better tomorrow. Now, some people, you see the way they've handled the tasks and the projects that they're handling, you know already they can become, say, a board member or a divisional head just by the nature of how they're delivering on their current role. And some people, you recognize they can only move one step forward or one step ahead. And it's always a difficult conversation, trust me. But the criteria is clear. You should base the assessment of future potential on current performance. That's it. Okay. And so high potential individuals are people you consider to be able to grow and are promotable within the organization, and they could have accelerated careers or steady careers, but they are high potential because you've assessed them and deemed them promotable within the organization, right? Yeah, so this is why this one was missing. A blocker. Okay, this is the most controversial one, and yeah, no surprise I put it for the last. So individuals who are called blockers, right? So think of what we had. We had a number one role. We have a role we're planning succession for, but there's a feeder role. Say like the CEO. If I go back to the example of the head of sales, or maybe let's even think about the CEO role, because it's always the easiest to navigate without getting too complicated. And you have somebody in the CEO role that you know you're planning succession for, and your feeder role is occupied by, let's say your feeder role is chief operating officer role, and chief operating officer role, COO, is occupied by somebody that you had planned to replace the CEO, but after 2 rounds or 2 to 3 rounds of performance reviews, the performance they are demonstrating does not give the business confidence to replace the CEO. And we believe the CEO's time or tenure is coming to an end. What do? What do you have? You have a blocker, because you've defined that role as a feeder role. And everybody becomes a blocker at some point in their life, in their career, with their organization. If you have a true talent strategy, you will become a blocker at some point or the other. Because if you're not progressing, then you're blocking. That's the reality of it. It's cold and hard facts, but if you're supposed to be CEO, we anticipated this individual to be CEO in 2 to 3 years' time, subject to the CEO moving on to other roles. That person can't get there. They become a blocker. Because what they've done is they're blocking the pipeline behind them. And other individuals who are considered high potential, young stars, rising, high flyers, blah, 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 they need to take on that role. And so you need to have a very a very strong conversation with the individual that is considered a blocker. And this is an exercise that you need to do across the entire pipeline chain, where you're identifying individuals who previously were planned to take on new roles or senior roles, but due to personal circumstances, performance results, changing lifestyle or whatever, they're no longer considered high potential or ready to take on that role. And so you have to, what do you do with blockers? You have to remove the block, because if you don't, you disengage the high potentials that are coming behind, and you actually, frankly, your business doesn't grow. Because if you keep somebody who's not delivering performance for you, guess what? You lose business and you might actually be out of business. So you better remove the blocker. It's not easy, I tell you. It's probably one of my hardest conversations to have whenever I have to do this one, but it has to be done. And what do you do with blocker? Removing them doesn't mean firing them, by the way. It just means putting them in a role that is no longer a feeder role to the number one role you're planning for. Okay? So it's not always about getting rid of the person, because somebody might just need a different division or a role where they're not managing anybody, and then they suddenly get revitalized, and then all their energy comes back, right? It's getting pretty dark on my side, right? Rain. Okay. Comments, questions about all what I've said so far before I jump into the heart of talent strategy. Any comments so far? Questions, Jay?
There's a question here from Omotola.
Yeah.
Says, times I consider succession planning a game of chance, because ultimately you cannot hold people down when they want to leave an organization. How do you handle a situation where you have earmarked a candidate, prepared him for 5 years to succeed his leader, and boom, leaves, hanging the whole plan out to dry?
Yeah, but that's why you shouldn't have one plan. Never go hunting with a single bullet. You don't have to. You can't have, because it's the same thing. Think about it. You complain as a company that the individual is not getting into the role, but think about it on the flip side. The employees too are also upset that you've promised them several times they're going to take on that role, but you don't make it happen as a company. So it cuts both ways. That knife cut both ways. What makes it work is the trust relationship that you have to establish in the first place. And remember what I said. If your business is growing, you will always have roles for people you've planned and prepared for. And if you keep on, so executing succession plan is the outcome of all the other things you're doing. Do you have a great culture? Are you compensating them properly? Are you offering development properly? Are you having transparent conversations with the individual every single time? Is it clear what that career path looks like to the individual that you're talking to? If you have that, and what's the quality of the line manager relationship? Are they getting feedback? All the other things that I'm not talking about, because you've been having a great session, and I know all across the month of August, all these different topics will be touched on during the tHRive program. Those are the things you need to think about that ends up impacting your succession plan. Okay, because if you've not, we always fear, what if they leave? Yeah, but what if they stay? Right? We start from that point of gap, of need, of fear. But guess what? If you don't do the right things, employees will leave anyway, right? And so but my point is, don't start with one bullet. Don't go pinning all your hopes and your plans on the one individual. That's why you're succession planning, people. That's why you're succession planning. Because succession plan is not for one person, it's for the entire organization. And therefore, once you see the whole employees in the company as talent and not some people, then you're not caught in that trap of, concerned. Yeah, what you will concern you, and there's some metrics that I talk about that are super important. Your high potential turnover. Your high potential turnover is so critical to measure, because that's the measure of how much of your best people are you losing. And if there's a problem there, you need to address it. What's the issue? Is it culture? Is it compensation? Are they, so for everybody consider high potential, are they sufficiently differentiated? Is your compensation strategy very, very clear to reward your high potentials better, and then make sure that they're competitive positioned within the market? If an employee is paid well, has the right career discussions, and the culture of an organization is great, you actually find that less people leave. Then you have to then force them out, because if they end up becoming blocker, you might let them go. Right? Any other question?
Okay, there are like 4 more questions. Do you want to take them now or later?
Yeah, I don't mind. No, seriously, because I mean, my slides are documents that I will run through when if I've already answered that part of the question, and then I'll just run through those pieces. But yeah, let's take the questions.
Okay, so Ashitu is asking.
Okay.
So what if there is no other role for the blocker? What happens?
Gotta leave the company. Aisha too has to leave the company. Short answer. Has to leave the company. And what are the ways? You either have to, if depending on the labor laws of the location you're in, you should either act according to the labor laws, because then you may have to pay them a severance to leave the company. Or if the performance is so poor and you manage them through performance improvement plan and it doesn't work out, then you might have to let them go through underperformance, really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Nika is asking that you please throw more light on Ready Now and Feeder Role.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And it will come through. That one is something that will definitely come through later on. But like I said, Ready Now, individuals who are available and have been developed through the organization to take over that number one role within 0 to 12 months. Okay. And the feeder role is a role that you've identified as critical and crucial, as a critical step before that person takes on the number one role. Another example is in a company that drives marketing that says, if before you become the chief marketing officer, you must have been the head of sales, because the head of sales is the guy who runs the largest sales team, largest population in the whole country, in the whole company or whatever. So you must be the head of sales before you become chief marketing officer. So then your head of sales role becomes a feeder role. So you want to make sure that the person that takes on the head of sales role, 9 out of 10 times, becomes the chief marketing officer. So that's what the feeder role is, really. Okay. So I'll take the couple next two, then I'll jump ahead. What are the other two questions you have?
Okay. Akombi says, in Nigeria, where a lot of CEOs want their children to take over, how does succession plan?
Here we go. Here we go with the Nigeria question. People, we don't plan HR based on the country context. Culture is important, but that example or that question, if you say, how does it work? Because, but guess what? There have been founders on this side of the world and that also have learned that their sons don't end up taking over from them. Think about even us, all of us on this call. There are things our parents did or they had dreams for us that we didn't end up following, right? So that's what happens with organizations where the founder has decided that the children will take over. How does succession planning work? It first starts with the founder or the CEO deciding that even if my child is going to take over, I better prepare my child. Because what happens is, in a lot of other countries, the children start as the boss boys. They drive the buses, they drive the sales cars in some of the cases. In our own case, because of the wealth, we say, how dare my child start from there? They become directors first thing. Some of the kids, because they've been trained Harvard and whatever, they end up being successful, but a lot of times they probably don't. And in reality, they have a different vision than their parents. So what do you do? This is where you build a business case to help them see, except they don't see themselves continuing the business after their own demise, which is the case. And I know this, I totally know this, as I've lived it a lot of times with local companies. Why should I plan for succession? Are you planning to kill me? Why are you asking me to plan for succession? You want to kill me? Is that why you're planning for succession? No, I'm going to be here. Don't worry, my son will take over or my child will take over. That kind of mentality means that, that organization doesn't even expect its business to grow beyond what it currently is doing. And they don't. That's why they collapse immediately, the CEO that. So how does it work? One, it works when the CEO has a change of heart to recognize sustainability and business growth over sentiment, right? One example of a CEO that at least has demonstrated that sentiment is low on his radar, although even though he practices it, is Dangote, I believe. He's worked with everybody from everywhere, and he's put everybody from everywhere in different senior roles in his organization. And I bet you there's some sort of framework around who, if there's anybody at Dangote here, please let me know, I could be wrong. But there's some sort of framework around deciding who gets what job next. Okay. But just from an outside person looking in, he's the one CEO who just hasn't flooded the entire organization with just his family members in critical roles. There's so many people, Indians. He uses consultants like crazy. Gets McKinsey guys, gets Accenture guys, and hires from literally everywhere. So when the CEO sees the viability of the company beyond themselves, the succession plan will work. But if they continue to see themselves as the only person that needs to be around to run that company, even when they're 90 years old, Akambi, this is where you say, people, this is where I dust my bag as a HR professional and I move to a more forthright company. Okay? So you cannot change the CEO's mind, unfortunately. Last question, then I move on.
Okay, so Adedoyin ask, can succession planning be achieved through delegation of duty?
Yeah, I know. Delegation of duty, it's part of the preparation. That's not the succession plan itself. Because when you execute a succession plan action, the individual you've been preparing takes over the job. It's not delegation of duty at that point. So what delegation of duty does is a form of development to prepare the successor. Clear? So that's what you're doing with delegation of duty. So don't assume delegation of duty is the succession plan. No. You've identified this guy or this lady as part of the individuals you have within the organization that could possibly take over. And therefore, you start to test that theory out by assigning certain tasks at that next seniority level to the individual. That is a form of development. It's development on the job. And the demonstration of performance through that delegation gives you or the business confidence that, yes, we're trusting the right person with some tasks that they will end up, performing well when they get onto what that next level looks like. So delegation of duty is a form of development to ready a successor. Okay, so we'll come back to the Q&A box in a bit.
All right.
Conscious that as you can see, I'm still getting very excited.
I extended the time.
Okay, so let's even start from the beginning, right? You don't do succession plan if there's no business. Okay, there's nothing about this that hangs in isolation from the business. It starts, lives and dies with the business. You need a business plan, you need a business idea. Somebody needs to be running the company and somebody needs to be seeing the opportunities for growth, right? Before you start to see and plan a succession plan. So first thing is, what growth strategic objectives do we have? Are we going to grow, functionally or product-wise? Are we adding new lines? Because what's interesting about work? I always, one of my mentors said to me once, and I really value what he said to me, because I joined the company and he asked me, how are you doing, Kamal? I said, I'm busy. I know, sir, there's a lot of work. He said, yeah, that's good. That means you're learning. And it struck me because we all complain about how busy work is, how we're tired, how we're stressed and all that. But guess what? If you're not busy, you'll also complain. And actually, you feel more concerned that I'm coming to work every day and I'm not doing anything because you're not growing and you're not learning. Once the business objectives are clear and it starts to show demonstration of growth, then you start to decide that, yeah, because we know what we're doing about this business and how we intend to grow, are we growing more products? Are we growing more locations regionally? Okay. Are we growing more service lines to our customers? Are we growing new aspects to our business where we didn't have a proper back office before? Now we need to implement a back office. All of those types of things, they drive the business agenda. And all of those things end up impacting the succession plan. Because the minute you start to declare on those types of organizational pillars, you start to think about how will I find people to populate them. And because I may not have anybody to populate them now. Sorry, my tea. That I don't have anybody to, have the idea that I want to grow to, one city today, I want to go to 5 cities. I may not know who will be in which city. I may need to hire immediately, but that should not be my only strategy to say every time I go to a new city, I need to hire somebody. So then my business strategy is dependent on hiring somebody. What if I don't find somebody to hire now? I need to grow somebody that I should be willing to send to my next location that I break ground in. I'm in the typical axis of LAP. LAP is Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. So I'm in LAP. But then there are new growth regions now to conquer, because I'm seeing some opportunities in the outside LAP axis. So who am I developing to go outside of LAP? And the other thing about it is the competitive challenges. We all talk about the war for talent. We will lose talent because people will go back to the example Ashita was giving. So that's why we need to have clearly that when we're thinking about competition, you don't think HR people, please, Vico, please, don't think of competition only in terms of products, right? When you think of competition in terms of people, the people you're losing your business products to are the same ones that may end up stealing your people. So when the marketing guys are talking about a new entrant in the market, very, very mindful that those could be the same people to lose that you're losing your people to. And then of course we talked about the culture earlier on. Those are all the things that you should feed into it, because your culture drives so much. If everybody already has an appreciation that in this organization, I know where I'm going to, or I have an idea, or somebody's going to tell me where I'm going to, then they end up staying. They will end up, loving the organization, or even staying even longer. And then, of course, what requirements do you have for the role, the position requirements? If you succession planning identifies the roles you need, then finds the people. Don't do it the other way around. Don't do it the other way around. No, no, no. Decide on the jobs first, then find the people for them. Don't start by having people and say, okay, what do I give this person? No, then you've already failed the exercise. So this is sort of, what then happens typically within the workforce space. And then of course, you guys, you do all this. You can see easily where succession planning stays. You find people. I told you my experience. I was hired for succession. Then I was developed for succession. I stayed because of succession, and I got into the job. I remember when I went into my first meeting, 3 days after I joined the company, before I even joined the company, they had requested my passport, and I was supposed to be going for a training in England. And then, several years down the line, I asked my boss, what made you even trust that this guy you were investing this much in? 3 days after I joined, I was sent on a training. And what made you trust that this guy was going to stay? And she said, she didn't have a reason to doubt me, because the minute she explained what she wanted me to achieve, it seemed that I bought into it. So why wouldn't she equip me? Because, we do it the other way. We say, demonstrate first, then I will trust you. In this case, she trusted first, then I demonstrated. It's so liberating. And I know my experience is not usual, and I know a lot of other colleagues of mine, even in the same company, didn't have that experience. So I know it's unique, but it's so, so liberating. But there were more examples of people like that, where we trusted them first by giving them the responsibility, giving them the equipment they needed, giving them even the payment they needed. Because salary is another challenge that impacts this. You say, I'll pay the person after they've delivered. No. If you need to promote the person into a role to prepare them to be a successor, pay them what they deserve for that job grade you're moving them into. Because then it could be dissatisfying. The person you think, yeah, that's why they leave. You wonder why they left. There was something that didn't work out. And on both sides, on both sides, it ends up becoming a how do I call it now? A difficult conversation to analyze, where you're starting to accept that, oh, I did wrong. Some people will leave. You don't have a choice. Some best people will leave, right? And you don't have a choice, but you'll be fine if you've been developing a lot of people. And okay, so typical outcomes: you end up attracting top people. You build great talent pipelines. You have top performers, and you always have individual performance, and you end up enhancing your retention strategies, right? Again, I'm going to go into some academic. I love the conversation part, but I need to give you some academia and some details about it. There's some principles around succession planning that makes it work, right? You must have board executive support. This is owned by the board. I told you, finance. Think about finance again. I go back to those guys. I'm telling you, those guys have something that we all need to learn from as HR professionals. They know that they are at the heart of what matters. If the CFO tells the CEO something, they have to listen. So, and then he's asking for support to say, look, we need to spend this much money. The CEO is going to listen. It's the same kind of conversation. So the CEO takes it closely to listen to the CEO, to the CFO. The CHRO sometimes has to fight for this so-called seat at the table, but thank goodness we're being recognized and there's more. But you're not the one that kicks off a succession discussion. It shouldn't be you. You're not. You create and manage the process to ensure excellent succession pipelines, but is owned and driven from the top. How? How can you get them to see this? Measures. You need metrics. You need to show them turnover metrics. You need to show them culture metrics. You need to show them how much of what they're not doing is impacting even the business result overall. How we're losing business. I had a for my team when I was in Lagos and I was recruiting for roles in the north, because at the time I was occupying a role. I needed to um I needed to hire in Borno State. Yeah, I needed to hire in Borno. And this is just the start of Boko Haram at the time. It was 2013, and they were still, it was kind of hot at that time. And we had several roles vacant for several weeks. It was going on months. And the urgency, the sense of urgency that I bled into my team, the guys that worked for me, and the lady, amazing lady, Senegalese lady, she was so wonderful. I told her, I said, look, for every day. So imagine the sales rep goes to 5 locations every single day, right? And each of the 5 locations, they end up buying maybe 100. Let's use some fake numbers for argument's sake. For every 5 locations, they buy 1,000 naira worth of products, because there's a sales rep that visits them every day. So he visits 5 locations every day. They buy 1,000 naira worth of products, and for 5 days, that means if he visits 5 locations for 5 days, that's 25 locations, 25,000 naira. So for every day we don't have a sales rep in that location, we're losing 5,000 naira. And for every week, we're losing 25,000 naira. No, this is unacceptable. No, we need to find somebody now. And once we had that conversation, it just flipped. And there was this different sense of urgency. Like, we're losing money by not having sales reps in this location. Instantly, we deployed. We went to Abuja, ran recruitment sessions for like a week, myself and her, and we ran the recruitment. We selected people, built even the bench strength of people that were successful from the selection process, but we didn't have roles for them immediately. So that's why we're even building an external succession pipeline, and that's also critical. Your succession pipeline in the future, the future succession pipelines, they're not only employees in the organization. You are even mapping people that are not in your company that you are planning to poach someday onto your shadow succession plan. And we did that because we said we need replacement plans for some of the roles. We knew that it was going to be difficult, and we knew it was going to be short term. So we weren't calling it succession plan, but we're planning for replacements. And we quickly hired more and brought that in. But I was able to get money from the chief marketing officer once I communicated to him that, hey, I understand the pain you're going through, and I'm going to fix it for you. Within my first 3 months of taking on that role, we had closed out all the vacancies in the north. Hey, it also helped that I speak fluent Hausa, so I kind of had to use my inside pocket. Hey, you use all your tools, right, to get what you want. So it helped. It helped. That one helped. But of course, it was really, really important that we responded to the CEO, the chief marketing officer's need. That's how HR people need to think, and that's how you get their interest. To come and start talking about succession planning without a basis of linking it to their business interest, they won't listen to you. Okay. And the next thing I talk about is transparency and communication. And then, of course, we talked about, we'll see more on transparency and communication a bit later. And then it's necessary to incorporate it into your core values. The continuous process improvement is a default for every organization, okay, for everything you do. All right, Jide, I'm conscious of time, and I still have a few more slides to go. Maybe at some future date we'll have this succession part 2, and go into some other areas that we don't cover. But I will, fear not, people, don't worry. That's not to say I'm dodging some things. I will empty as much as I have onto this session. Okay. So
Great.
okay. So 4 approaches to succession planning, and this I found this image last night as I was preparing, and I said, okay, yeah, it's really cool, and it explains some of the things. So when you think of this grid and you see what people trying to do, or process centric, you want to be clear on the objective that you're having around your succession plan. Okay, are you doing it for compliance sake? The worst conversations you want to have with managers is when you tell them, have you done your rating? Performance due, have you done your rating? That's what we do. Check the box. And you just want to get the names, identification of names. And then sometimes it's, and you want to make, the idea here is you have 4 approaches, we should be focused on making people-centric decisions that is engaging, business-centric and behavioral. The box in the green on the top where it's centered. If you make familiar and non-threatening decisions, you might end up getting bitten in the back. And then please don't make it competitive. A succession plan, a succession discussion is not about competition. Yes, there may be two people waiting to become CEO, and it will be unfortunate one person leaves and one person doesn't. But the kind of conversation you have with the person that doesn't get it makes all the difference. And it's not always going to be hunky dory, but if you set it up to say, I need both of you to fight it out, you're going to create a culture that will not even be good for the organization. And it happened when I had to manage one, where I had to tell them that, look, guys, if you're in competition internally, guess who's winning? External competition. Yeah, you can have internal, but friendly competition to move the needle, but you should be focused on achieving your business goals. If you're inside here bickering and fighting about who did this, which team is better, external competition is stealing your market share. And when they're stealing your market share, you're going to lose revenue. And when you lose revenue, guess what? You'll be out of a business. So what's the point of the internal competition that you're bickering about? Okay. And so a few things about the stages of succession planning. First, we've talked a lot about this, and these are one of those slides that I'm just going to sort of whisk through because I have another slide I really want to spend a bit of time on. What's the business imperative? How are the business leaders involved? What do you want to achieve? Are you growing product service lines? And then, this beautiful conversation of what is a critical position, not a critical person. We go, not a critical person. What are the critical positions? And what defines the critical positions? It depends on the competencies. It also depends on how that role drives the business agenda. What is the contribution of that role to delivering the business result? That is what is a critical position. And you measure it. Some positions, all the positions that are on the board, for example, could be considered critical, and certain roles that, based on the specialty or the nature of the skill sets required to do that job. How do you want to know if a role is critical? Ask yourself, how long will it take you to find a replacement if the incumbent leaves? That gives you a measure of how important that role is to you, and what's the scale and size or budget that role is considering. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too. I've told you that I'm going to move. If I'm rushing, please tell me to slow down by telling GD in the chat box, and I'm sure he'll tell me. Okay, then you need to come back with your talent identification process. What does performance management look like? How do you measure performance, right? And how do you review talent review process? What's your annual talent review process? Where do you start from? What are the stages in the different one? And then assessment is something we're going to look about in the next slide. And then, of course, once you've identified the people you intend to put on your succession plan, or you've identified them as for their potential, you have to develop them. What is the quality of their individual development plans? If I paint some sort of utopia, or I was living in a very peaceful world of doing all of these things perfectly, no. Every year, we still had to fight managers to write quality development plans for their high potentials, for their individual. Because the assumption here is when you tell somebody the person is high potential, they're good now, there's nothing to be done, they're good. No. What is the development plan? And we get detailed about it. Like, what steps are they taking? What kind of, and we go 70, 20, 10. How are they developing on the job? What projects are they doing? What 20% relationship should they have? What's the 10% that's missing in terms of training? I will design high potential leadership development programs, send them all over the place, but it was never the focus. It was always a total plan of 70, 20, and 10. And then finally, you assign the individuals into the role. Okay, so this is like a framework that you could use. And of course, there's a lot more level below this, but this for me is a high level framework that you have to use when you think about introducing a succession plan discussion. And of course, the complement to this, myself and my friend who was the head of reward at the time, we held sessions together because we always said, and it was true, you don't do them in isolation. You don't talk talent management in isolation of reward management. They both have to have as a total conversation for the employee, because you want to know that you're developing somebody, but you're also paying them well, properly. Okay, this is the 9 box. I know there was a question earlier on. You said about what is the 9 box. This is the 9 box grid. Okay, it's kind of busy, but think of it as 9 sort of box. The first thing you learn about the 9 box that I'll talk about is the 2 axes, right? The potential axis and the performance axis. So you can see there's low, medium, and high on potential, and low, medium, and high on performance. Now, the performance one typically ends up becoming easy because it's a measure of the annual ratings. That's what you put there. And your annual ratings, typically low, medium, and high, is below expectation, meets expectation, exceeds expectation. That's all. Then on the potential side, gets a little bit more tricky because what is low, medium, and high is linked to the leadership behaviors or what you've defined in your organization as necessary in each case. So low, medium, and high is low demonstration of your leadership behavior, medium demonstration of your leadership behavior, or a high demonstration of leadership behavior. How is that assessed? People, if you ask me that question, I already asked myself before you ask me. It's the jam question of all jam questions because it always comes across as being very subjective when you're doing the leadership assessment because it's a demonstration of the behaviors you want to see in the organization. And how is that evidenced? Through feedback and through, line managers reporting about it. So your mind just has to be able to say, we've defined maybe 4 leadership behaviors: agility, innovation, resilience, result-oriented. So when I've defined those are my 4 leadership behaviors I expect all my leaders to demonstrate, is this person low on agility and low on innovation? Okay, what does that mean? So that basically is what goes into the potential assessment, right? So you see this different one. Let's not talk about 7. That guy is already out. So that person is out. Typically, most organizations tend to work with 2, 3, 5, and 6. Why? It's obvious because your 3 is your star, right? 3 is your star. It's your star. And typically, most organizations tend to have, if you wanted to have a target around it, so what's the percentage of the organization that should be in the 3 buckets? It will be the people that you say about 5 to 10% of your migrant population, 5 to 10%. And that helps you, right? All my time when I was at BAT, in that 3 box, we never got to 7, we never got to 9%. We were like always ranging between 6 and 7%, 6 and 7%, always. Because you see the true star, very clear. But so then we had number 2 is the other guy who is demonstrating medium performance, but high leadership behavior. This bucket was always empty because it was harder to find or agree on who was demonstrating the best leadership behavior. It was really difficult. But we found some people, but they were not sustainable because like every company, same thing with my former company, BAT, it's performance first. And performance is easier to see and track and measure than behavioral leadership potential or leadership behavior, demonstration of leadership behavior. Okay? I'm conscious I'm rushing. I'm very conscious of that because I know I can see the clock in front of me. So let me slow down. With the rising star, the strong contractor challenge and reward, that's the action you want to take, is the rising star. What is interesting with the rising star is they're demonstrating high performance, but then the leadership demonstration of their behavior is somewhat, okay. And you can see that because they're already working very well in demonstrating performance, they can easily, flip into a strategic star. Where are the ones you promote first? Number threes. Always. They're the first ones you promote. And once you've done this really well, this forms the basis of your talent review discussions. You have the conversation about them. You decide who are the strategic stars and then who are the 2s and 6s. We had a rule where we tracked the 5s. It's the worst place to be. Adaptable key performer. It's like your so kind of guy or person. It's like your sha. Those guys are not they're not in the best of spaces because one, they could easily fall below into inconsistent performer very quickly, and then or if given the right push, they could easily move up into the strategic star or rising star, right? And you see what we tell them is, so do we tell people which box they belong to? We said don't, but employee managers did. How do we fix it? We didn't. We just let it ride because what we just knew was we defined the terms high potential 1 and high potential 2. All we said managers should tell employees, we said tell them they are high potential or not. Tell them. We made sure you told them after the talent review meetings, you have to give the feedback. Are they high potential, yes or no? This I know is one of the ones that a lot of debate. I even got a question on the HR forum I belong to recently about this question. And it's like, we had a debate. Best practice says, tell them. My experience says, tell them. Research says, tell them. If you don't, you're just not helping yourself or the organization. Tell them. Yeah, if you're not high potential this year, yeah, you should be happy. You could be high potential next year. And this is the thing. If you say some people are high potential, then it becomes a self-perpetuating prophecy. A strategic star will always be a strategic star because easily we don't want to debate them too much. And sometimes we argue away their flaws, and it's a dangerous thing to be. So while I tell you all this, important to note, this works. There are other methods of assessing potential and talent that I've seen out there. But for me, this works. It works. So what? One and two. So this for me is a grid that I find, like I said, it pretty much works for anyone, for any organization, if you've been able to define or articulate your positions around this. Jide, I'm going to kind of pause on this one because I know for a number of people, if you use 9-box model, this is like piece of cake. You've seen this before. If you're not used to this, then maybe one or two questions, and I'll take that before I kind of move on. I don't have that many more slides anyway, and nothing. There's only one more slide of sort of depth of complexity. Any questions so far?
Okay, I think there's a question on this 9-box. It says, can we confirm if 1 and 2 are supposed to read potential or professional as it reads?
Yeah, it is professional. The the potential statement applies to everybody within this group. So high potential, low potential. It's professional. It's not potential. It's not called high potential, adaptable. No. Professional. This is just, I found this grid again on the internet just to explain the 9-box model. What you need to remember, people, is 2, 3, 6 are the true high potential individuals. Okay, because one, the number 6 is really a good watch out person because he's demonstrating, or she is demonstrating, true performance that you want to see, and they can quickly convert to a star. And then the number 2s, hard to find, very hard to find. If you find them, keep them, because again, they're demonstrating the kinds of behaviors you want to see in the company, and then they can quickly also turn into the strategic star. Watch out for your 5s, just monitor them and track them. We tracked them, we included them in our total numbers, otherwise it would have been so low. But what we ended up finding out was managers were making it the easy option out, the easy way out. You just put everybody in the middle, everybody in the middle, everybody's in the middle. That's what tends to happen. Okay. Any other question before I continue?
I think we can go ahead.
Okay, super. So this is a form or like an enterprise level planning of succession plan across the organization, and the different levels you should think about developing conversations about a talent review, because this is what feeds into the different levels. So think about the okay, yeah, sorry, this is our work from home interesting moments. He just woke up and my son came to say hi. So where was I? Succession planning across the organization. So first, it says you should differentiate between business units. Yes, that's true. This plan succession for the different departments that you have at the HR, finance, and all that. And then if you have factory review, plan succession for the head of factory. And if you have geographical spread, plan succession differentiated across the spread of geography. And sometimes they will overlap. So the finance, do you have a succession plan for the finance manager in the east? And there's another one for the finance manager in the west. So, but then you need to then coordinate them together. That's what it says within the business unit. So you know that if you have 9 geographical roles in finance, of the 9 geographical roles in finance, how many of them have ready now successors? How many of them have successors for later, right? And then make it integrated across your business unit. So you find your managers, your emerging leaders, and this is a long process, people. It's a long process, but HR managers working with the business ends up driving it. So it literally starts, it flows across like that. It starts at that bottom end where you plan the conversations to happen at the factory level, at the regional level, and then every region then comes to a central point where the national discussion happens about all the salespeople, for example, and we did that, and we discussed the strength of the pipeline. What questions were we asking? How did they demonstrate performance during this year? What behaviors, according to leadership capabilities, did they demonstrate? You know what's interesting? Every employee that we hired aspired to be one of the ones who was talking about people like that, because those moments, those moments were great people development conversation moments, because you needed to come and present your staff, present your employees in a forum of your peers, discussing which one of them was the best. It was a calibration session that you needed to come and talk about each one of your peers or your subordinates amongst your peers. So 9 sales managers are sitting together discussing all the sales reps within their teams and saying, this is the next best sales rep I have. This guy, watch out for them. And we had programs to help them, like, internal development programs that we set up that I managed, at the time, for emerging young leaders. And when they selected their names, because we didn't put them on succession plan immediately, but what we saw was they were high potential individuals that we need to watch out for. Then I would develop them, put them on my development program, run them over 18 months. They'll have projects, exposure to senior leaders. The ones that turn and convert into what we're expecting were promoted and moved into more senior roles, right? The current chief marketing officer is a product of such, career progression at BAT, because he joined as a sales rep, and it was our first great example of somebody who joined as a sales rep in the company, and I think about 17 years later he became the chief marketing officer. Feels very long. You go, wow, 17 years, but yeah, it took him that long to build sales and marketing experience across multiple divisions. Then the international group wanted to validate him and said, no, we don't want you. You cannot become chief marketing officer in Nigeria if we haven't seen you. So because this is where the international interest comes in. Then he started his journey. He was sent to South Africa for 2 years, demonstrated performance. Like, okay, smashed it there. Then he said, okay, now fine. You've done it in another market outside of your home country. Why don't you come and do it in the head office? Let's see if you still got it. He went to the head office, smashed it again there. Finally, because it was the head office, they all saw him. They then felt comfortable to say, okay, fine. In like 20 years or 22 years of the British America Tobacco Organization, they appointed a marketing director that was Nigerian for the first time, right? For the very first time. And it was such a big deal. Because prior to that, what were they doing? Appointing expatriates all the time. There's such a sort of churn and churn of expatriates. But it only happened because we worked according to this sort of framework where we built our succession plans in Nigeria, we rolled it up to the regional teams, which was Africa and the Middle East at the time. And then that was also transferred to the global team. So I managed that when I moved to England. I became the one running talent reviews according to my region. So I was managing people, like 9 different talent managers across my division. There were probably another 17 people reporting to me within that team. So then I would do the board succession for the top 100 roles within the region according to function, according to geography, and deliver that to the global team, where they then plan for senior succession at that level. The last CEO we had, the last 2 CEOs that we've had at BAT globally, they've all been grown from within. They've all been grown from within. Okay. Okay, some key succession planning, and now I promise I am wrapping up because I do want to give at least a good, decent time for questions. Be clear with your strategy. Ensure you focus on the entire organization. Please focus on the entire organization, and then make sure you develop a talent pipeline that the execution depends on the strength of the pipeline, and you use all the tools in your buckets. People, you use everything. How you develop them, what you do for mentors, and then consider all the questions that you need to ask. Or all the different factors that you need to ask. So some things that I believe, I saw this and I was really, developing this, and I said, yeah, it's so true. What is the reason you're looking for successors? Why? What objective are you trying to achieve? Is it somebody with, and it's always about the skill sets. It's not the physical attributes, people. No. And it's definitely not the tribal attributes. Please, no, not about the tribal attributes. No, it's about the competencies that you're looking to achieve in that succession number 1 role. And you have to have clear competency definition. And don't go competency definition for just the sake of building a competency map. What is required to be successful in the role? Okay. Don't play favorites. It's hard to say don't, but it happens. I had already shared that example with us earlier when he said, how do you plan succession when the CEO is basically planning for his family members. Don't play favorites. And it's easy to say this. In practice, how do you prevent yourself from playing favorites? You just not make sure that there's a level of transparency and governance that excludes certain people from the conversation. You don't put in people that should be outside of the conversation in the room. And if there's a reason to excuse yourself from a discussion, you should do so. I've raised up my hands when I was part of an interview that was for my friend. I said, no, I can't be in this interview. This guy's my friend. I've known him since my KPMG days, and I'm not coming in for this interview. And I stood down. This is the kind of thing that you should do. Will it happen that the CEO wants somebody ahead of another person? Yeah. And will it happen? Yeah, you can argue, but then ultimately the succession decision will be made by the head of the division. You just make sure you provided all the candidates that they need. Ignoring disappointment. This comes with the example Aishito had said about somebody not getting the job and then they leave. If you ignore it, what does that mean? If the person has to leave the organization, let them leave. If they are convinced to stay and you give them a different role that they need to move to continue to grow and develop, yeah, address it. Don't assume it will be okay when two people were next in line and only one person got it. The other person that didn't get it, what conversation are you having with that person? Okay, about where they're going to next. What future do they still have with the organization? Yeah, so I told you about competition already, and then we've already flogged transparency a lot. So I also kind of again discovered this, and I said we're good to share, built this one. Fundamentals of talent management. What do you want to do? What competencies do you want to have? What development discussions do you want to have, first of all? And then in succession planning, what fundamentals should you be thinking about? Leadership development is a strategic priority. Training is not. Again, see, critical positions, so crucial. Who are your high potential individuals? Okay, what development plan do they need? Who are the people you need to be involved in playing this game? Execute the development plan. I had a measure when I came to talent review meetings at the beginning of my talent review meeting. I show the number of people we had identified for specific development actions. And then I showed the number of people that actually completed those development actions. And I'm not saying training, development actions. This person was planned to go on a project. Did they go on the project? Yes, no. Because that's how you engage the employee as well. I always had that metric. What is the measure of execution now? Because we had a meeting the last time. We said we're going to do all these things. Did we do them? How much of them did we do? And if you didn't do them, what support did you need or don't need? Yeah, scale up. Make sure you expand the scope. Focus your recruiting on entry-level positions, not only, but majorly. Majorly, you should focus your recruitment on entry-level positions. You will recruit at senior levels and experience levels as well, but that they should not be your go-to solution, where every time somebody leaves, your next action is go and recruit. No. Your recruitment should start, the bulk of your recruitment, if you look at assess the current cycle of recruitment you have in your organization and ask yourself, where am I recruiting the most? Am I hiring more experienced people? Or am I actually starting from, do I have a strategy to hire, from the bottom up and develop them? And then there's some tools, there's so many tools these days that you can use to establish a succession plan. And I built 2 leadership development programs in the company, actually built a third one for GMs. We then built another one. I worked on developing another one for individuals we called country managers. So you build custom development programs. And talent profile is, so what does it look like to be a talent manager in this organization? What does it mean to be high talent, high potential talent, for example? Then establish a mentorship program. That's very critical to. So yeah, this is absolutely my last slide. I found this very interesting in my research, and I thought I'd share with you guys that this is something to think about as, and this is a good maturity model that you can take away for yourself and ask yourself, where are you at? Are you doing fragmented replacement planning, where you have all your list of high-level positions? Maybe there's a level before this where you're not even doing replacement plan itself. I didn't put that there, but I'm going to assume at the very baseline level, you have some sort of idea of all your senior level positions, and you know who your best people are, whether you call them high potentials or not, doesn't matter. And somehow you don't develop them fully, but you give them assignments or delegate duties to them that help them grow. Or maybe you do the next level, which is you actually have development plans, you do talent reviews, is only focused on some business units, keep it focused, this one. Then you have target key positions, and is typically driven by HR. Challenge here is that it's not very successful because everybody feels the pain of HR chasing them. One thing we did was to make it a performance objective to identify your successor. When I was at BAT, it was part of your performance objectives. Who did you identify? You had to have names of your successors that you identified. Okay. Yeah, you had to find success for yourself. Are you doing integrated succession management where there's clear alignments owned by top agency leader? Or maybe in the very future, some organizations have already moved to this where everything is very transparent. The talent mobility, they move around really, really well. This super dynamic. It's focused on the pools or competencies. It's some sort of future, but that means most of the organization or the entire company will just have a fluid way of moving that is just professional management rules, and then they only plan succession for the top roles. Okay, so I leave this with you as a suggestion for you to do a critical assessment of where you are and where you hope to be. And I'm not saying that this is a continuum, you should move from one to the other, to the other, to the other. No. What works for your company? Where are you now is the question. What do you need to drive the business agenda you have for your organization? That's the question you should be asking yourself. And I am happy to help. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me and send me questions. But hey, I think that was it from me, Jide. I was going to.
Fantastic. That was awesome. Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Any questions, people?
Yes. So let's quickly take some questions. Please, if you have questions, please send them in now. Okay, so this question came earlier in your presentation.
Okay.
Fung is asking, is there a timeline to plan succession for top management roles, such as CEOs?
The timeline. Oh, are you talking about, okay, what's the ideal track? What's the ideal timeline? It depends on the size of the organization, honestly, and the maturity of the organization. And of course, the depth of the organization as well. If you have deep layers, meaning the number of roles between the CEO and the most junior role in the organization, oh my goodness, the longer your hierarchy, the longer it takes to plan succession, right? Because then it's defined by the number of roles that you have. Okay, so typically, in most cases, there's always like a 17 years like the sweet spot, and sometimes it goes to like 21, 22, because it also depends on the hierarchy of the organization. So if an organization is really mature, old, again, market capitalization, very, very large, revenue large, it takes quite a while. Some startup companies these days, they go faster. It took how many years for Bill Gates was a starter, then he handed over to Steve Ballmer, who now gave it over to Satya Nadella. But then Satya will tell you that he's been at Microsoft all his life, and he's probably worked there for, I don't know, more than 20 plus years. But I'd say, without pegging myself to a number, I would say on the average about 17 years. Again, caveat, depending on the size of the organization. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you for that. Where most employees are hired based on specific projects and duration, is succession planning relevant in a project-driven environment?
No, you're right. That's very excellent question. That's replacement planning. And yeah, you're right. It's typically you're replacing people. Your project, it starts and ends. So because the project is starting and ending, you can't be doing succession planning for them. So no, you're right. It's replacement planning for project roles. Yeah.
Okay, so this looks like a long one. Omotola is asking, the big issue in my organization is with the blockers. You find that they are the ones with the longest tenure in the
Yes, so.
organization,
Yes, so.
great at their jobs, but just do not possess enough potential to move up to
Yeah.
leadership roles.
Yeah.
They are in the 5 box. Yet we have more junior candidates in the pipeline on the 3 box. We have not gotten to that point where we apply zero sentiment and just let the blockers go because we still want them for the current job they perform. How do you advise I can make a change in this regard?
I think the question you have to ask yourself is how much of the high flyers are you letting go? How many of them are leaving your company because they don't have the opportunity to grow? And if you really believe in what we said at the beginning for succession planning, which is about the long-term sustainability of the organization, you are putting your organization at risk by keeping individuals who have had long tenure. So think about somebody who has been in the company for 25 years. They will not be in the company for the next 25 years. That's a fact. And it's not your choice. It's just a fact. They can't be there for another 25 years. So if you keep the people who are there for 25 years because they've been there for that long, and you don't have courageous conversations about, so what do we do with this person? And like I said, it doesn't mean fire them today. It could be some kind of transitionary role into a project where they continue to offer guidance and mentorship to that next generation of leaders, still making them valuable, but keeping them in the place of the job while dissatisfying or disgruntling the next generation that should be coming through is putting the organization at risk business-wise. So choices, put them in the project role, have a honest conversation with them about what's the best way to transit them out of the role and when they want to leave, and if you need to execute faster, all down to the person's ability as well. If the person is delivering, you might want to keep them in a different capacity. If they're not, you have to have the conversation about letting them go. If you don't know how to show the numbers, show how much of your turnover is happening at the junior levels because you're keeping a blocker in there. Yeah. Next.
Okay. Atinuke is asking if one is in an organization where one is being groomed for a particular role, but the compensation is way below the role. The learnings are good, but the pay is not good. Promises made over time on the part of the owner has not been fulfilled. Kindly advise on the best line of action.
Then you've already broken trust. The culture of the organization is already broken, right? You've broken trust. So that organization, clearly, even from a business point of view, if they have that kind of relationship with their employees, it's you have to check what kind of relationship they have with their clients as well. Maybe they have such a dishonest relationship with their clients. And even if they have an honest one, it's not going to be sustainable, because what that means, the nature of the business may die out pretty soon. The company might die out pretty soon. If you're not getting what you want satisfactorily, I suggest that you find another organization, or you look to change in the first instance, looking to change. But remember, you're asking for more money or based on what you know the business is doing. How much of what the business is making do you know as an HR person? Do you understand how much are they making? So it's your choice to understand the financials. The part that I believe is really bad is where you say they don't keep their promises. The manager is not keeping the promises they made. Nothing frustrates employees or talent more, individuals you consider high potential talent, like unkept promises. It's the worst thing you can do. It's even worse than not paying them well. You make a promise, you keep it. And if you don't, if it consistently happens, I suggest that, you find another organization that you believe is more aligned to the culture and the values that you want. Yeah.
Okay, next question is from Lois.
Okay.
Great, great session. Interested in finding out in a bit more detail how you would approach succession planning across borders, e.g., if the HR function oversees, say, the entire African region.
Yeah, that one. I'd say needs to go in a longer conversation, definitely more than the 4 minutes I still have. But the simple thing is, you need to map out the different layers that you decide you want to plan succession for according to each country level, right? And each department within a country level. So you roll that up that way from country, within a country, and the departments within the country, you assess succession for that, and then combine the number at the Africa level for all the different departments. But then you have an Africa level conversation as well, and ask the question of how strong is the pipeline in Africa overall? And maybe some countries are better than some others because they have, better talents waiting to take over. And it may be that some departments in some countries are better than some departments in some countries. So you have better pipeline for HR talent in Nigeria, and you have poor HR talent in Kenya, as an example. Or in South Africa, you have better finance talent, and you maybe then start to think about moving them around because you're offering them, Sub-Saharan Africa regional experience to say, I'm going to move some Nigerians to Kenya, move some South Africans to Nigeria, and that kind of way. Yeah.
Okay, I think there are some questions in the chat section. 1 minute. Okay, succession planning applicable only in the private sector?
No, public sector organizations also actually consider succession planning. Remember what I said, it's becoming critical to, but the nature of what the competencies or how you assess individuals to succeed in public sector, obviously is very different. Please remember, the profit motive is not existing in public sector, right? So they don't have the same imperatives that the private sector has. The private sector is determined to continue to be successful, to be here for 100 years and more. So for them, is this commercial imperative to do succession planning. Yeah. So you're right. Public sector, less stringent, but some of them are starting to do it. Yeah.
Okay, good. How can succession be managed in an organization where every role is being occupied by one person, e.g., one HR, one IT, one finance manager? That is how the
that company is not growing. Remember, it starts with growth. It needs to grow. The business needs to grow. You can plan succession only if growth is happening. If the organization is not growing, yeah, those people will never leave that spot. The business has to grow for you to then bring succession planning into it. For this number of sites, you can then have replacement plans for short-term replacements of some of the jobs, but the business must be growing and continue to be growing. So maybe the CEO needs to identify new growth areas where he's going to need a second of those type of roles. And in any case, the back office roles are always singular, right? You don't need 10 IT people or 10 heads of IT because you want a shared services form of IT. But yeah, the business needs to be growing for you to be having multiple roles and opportunities. Yeah. I don't know. Final question. I mean, hey, if your members want to, attendees want to reach out to me, please, I'm on LinkedIn, the same name. You've seen my name, and I'll send my slides over to GD in case the attendees want my slides.
Okay, great. I think that'll be all. We've maxed out our 2 hours. Thank you, Kamal. Let's get some reactions, some feedback in the session. How was the section? How was the presentation? Let's show appreciation to our speaker. Let him know how well this went. Okay. Thank you so much for taking out probably the first few hours of your morning to.
I try to sleep now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. No,
okay, there's comments here. Thank you, Kamal. Awesome session. Eunice says deep insights unveiled. Olaide, very insightful session. Blessing, awesome presentation. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
We can't take this question again, unfortunately, but you can reach him on LinkedIn, Kamal, at Big Bay.
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
And he is a guy. We'll be sure to respond.
No, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Our next session is starting in about 1 hour. Employee Experience and the Evolution of Work by Patrick Akam. Again, please, to get live updates when when we start the session, please, the fastest way and the quickest way is to join the Telegram channel. We'll send alerts there. I must reiterate again, it's not a group, so no one has access to your contact details. It's spam free. No, it's not a group where chats are sent. It's just for us to provide updates, so you won't wake up to 1,000 notifications. So please, that's the quickest way to get alerts. Please join the Telegram channel. Take note of the attendance code for the purpose of claiming your recertification credits and getting a certification of completion at the end of this program. Thank you very much. It's been nice having you all here. See you again in about an hour. You can go and have lunch and gather here again by 3 p.m. Nigerian time. Thanks again.
All right, Jay. Bye. And I think I'll be there again at the end of the month, right?
Last weekend, yes. Tomorrow we'll be back last weekend.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be talking about one of my favorite topics. That one I love also, along with succession plan. I think, all my topics are.
Yeah. We can't wait to have you again. Thanks a lot.
No, looking forward to that. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.